Hey guys, Ian here, Nolo Designs, and we're sitting in the warehouse, back from vacation. Got about 6,500 miles on the new Pilot Trailsport that we picked up, and I wanted to go through a few things that I like and a few things that honestly I think Honda missed. So let's get to it. I like old school stuff, so I got paper. But I'm gonna start with some of the things that I do like. Over the course of the trip, tons of miles, over 100 hours in the vehicle, and it's comfortable. It's a really comfortable place to be. It rides nice. It drives well. I don't have any major complaints with that. I think the steering's maybe a little bit light at highway speeds, but that's like a personal preference. I wouldn't expect that, you know, that just kind of is what it is. I feel like that's a personal thing there, but it's extremely comfortable. I think ergonomically it works well. You can find places to, you can find a driving position that you want. I feel like I can see adequately out of the vehicle, and overall, yeah, it's pretty good. I got no complaints with it, and that's something that I think from a day-to-day livability, it does really, really well. And I think that's probably kind of the first and foremost thing. If you're going to do any sort of overlanding, adventuring, camping, or just owning the vehicle, you want it to be comfortable. And I feel like the Pilot does that really well. The second thing on the list that I like a lot about the Pilot, and specifically the Trailsport model, is that it has the new trail torque logic, which Honda put a lot of effort into, at least from their marketing. It looks like they tried really hard to get it right. And I'm not 100% sure when it kicks in, but it felt like, from my experience out on the trail, was actually anytime I was trying to get over something without shooting off of it, and I'd be riding the brake at the same time. So basically doing a little bit of left foot braking on the trail. It felt like that's when it kicked in, and the system, you could feel it running the ABS and keeping that wheel spin down and just kind of allowing kind of a forward crawl momentum to happen. So it was, it worked really, really well. It actually allowed me to get the vehicle into positions where I myself wasn't 100% comfortable. I was able to, there was a little offshoot section of trail, and I thought, well, let me see if I can even get onto this hill. And it was kind of rutted at the bottom. It was also very soft, and it didn't miss a beat. It kind of shocked me, actually. I just kind of crept in, the left foot brake. I felt the system kick in. I just stayed in the gas, and it actually pulled me up onto this hill to the point where I was just staring straight into clear blue sky, and thought to myself, okay, I'm good. I don't think I need to continue on this path. And went ahead and backed down, but I don't think I would have been able to get there that gracefully in the Ridgeline. I don't think I would have been able to do that in my 21 Ridgeline. But all in all, really happy that Honda added that in. And something else that kind of falls in line with the Trailsport to some degree too is the 360 cameras. It's one of those love-hate things. I feel like you get used to using them and then you forget how to do this without them. I don't know, I feel like maybe I'm one of those people where it'd be great to have them, and it is great to have them. I do like them. It worked out really well there was several kind of blind knolls on the trails that we were running, and you couldn't see anything on the other side. And so having that camera was extremely helpful. However, I found myself using it way more frequently instead of just learning the size of the vehicle the same way that I would in a vehicle that didn't have the cameras. I will say this too, I use the cameras a lot. There's an option to run just the cameras on the mirrors, shooting downward, and that actually has a good perspective to where you can gauge how far or close, you are to something. And that was really helpful for trying to avoid pinstripes. The Pilot's not exactly a small vehicle either, and so it was handy to kind of help me pick my way through sections of trail where there was a lot of brush and things like that. So I like the camera system a lot. I think it could end up being a crutch for some people, but ultimately I think it's a good add especially for this model. So other things that were kind of this is more of a livability standpoint, but I remember there was a lot of people that complained about it with the ZF 9-speed in the older models, is that in this, with having the Honda 10-speed, it will let you kind of go from drive to reverse to park. Everything kind of flows smoothly. It feels very similar to if you're pulling the lever back and forth. It has a more natural feel. I know for me in my Ridgeline, if I put it in drive, it's like I've got to wait a couple seconds and then we're in drive and then we can go, or reverse. There is no way to get from reverse to drive quickly. And so the Honda 10-speed seems to have taken that and smooth that operation out. I do still think maybe the 9-speed's a little smoother than the 10-speed, just from driving it a bunch. But ultimately, I think it's good. No complaints there. So those are things that I like. The ergonomics inside, I like the knobs and all that stuff, but I'm no professional car reviewer. I'm just some guy that enjoys doing a lot of other things. So we'll leave it at that. But so those are some of the things that I like. I do wish there was a button. This is kind of a random nitpick thing on the interior. I wish there was a button or a way to turn off the hatch light, because when we were camping, if you opened the rear hatch, the light would just be on and stay on, and there was no way to turn it off from back there. And so maybe I missed the option somewhere, I don't know, but I ended up actually putting a piece of red duct tape over top of it, and it worked out perfect because it cast a red U in the back of the truck, and it didn't really attract any bugs, and I was able to, I could cook with it still. It was still bright enough I could cook. I could, brush your teeth, that sort of thing. So it's kind of a weird nitpick thing there, but I really wish it had just a button, or even if I could push the button that, the light that was back there. I think that'd be a good little thing to add. So on to some of the things that I felt like were kind of a miss, and this is going to have a lot more to do with just kind of using the vehicle on the trail. I think from a general livability standpoint, I don't feel like Honda missed a whole lot. I think and they went that extra mile with the Trailsport, which is awesome to see. It's got a extra inch of clearance from the factory. We've got skid plates from the factory, and they improved the all-wheel drive system and the kind of the traction control system there. So those are big things that I think they did a really good job on, but I really think that they missed the mark a little bit. I feel like between the transmission and engine coolant, because those are the things I can monitor pretty easily with the scan gauge, I feel like there's maybe a miss in the control loop of how that's set up to keep the system cool, because we were running Hayden Pass, which is a relatively steep trail, but it's basically just this constant climb. And for me personally, if I see transmission temps hit like 225, I say, okay, I'm done. I'm going to wait. I'm going to let it cool down. And so we were climbing up. I made it maybe about a third of the way up, and the Pilot's, it's pulling along just fine. It's doing great. Everything is exactly like I would expect it to be. No difference in driving, nothing like that. But I'm watching my temperature gauges, and they just keep climbing. And so at one point I pull over and I stop, and the coolant temperature is at 215 degrees. The transmission fluid temperature is at 226 degrees. And I'm sitting there, and I just pulled over, and not a single radiator fan is running, no cooling fan, nothing is running other than the engine. The engine is running. And it blows my mind to think, in my opinion, I would think if you're on the trail model, you should have this thing set up so that way when temperatures start to climb, those fans kick on and run at full tilt to cool it off. And so I actually ended up turning the AC on full cold, and it cycled the fans a little bit, and that didn't really make a huge difference. And so that was a little bit disappointing. It didn't make a huge difference, but at least the fans were running. And so something that's important to note for a transmission, we're kind of shifting gears here a little bit to some degree, no pun intended, transmission talk, but you know, something you need to know is if you are using this and your transmission you feel is maybe it's warm, I got done doing this climb, even if you're not monitoring your temperatures, the Pilot has to be in drive to really cycle the fluid. Because I tried to do a neutral hold and it wouldn't let me do a neutral hold because it said the transmission fluid was too hot. And so I couldn't do a neutral hold. And so I left it in drive with the parking brake set, and that was the only way that I was able to get the transmission temperatures to cool down, because you've got to circulate fluid through the heat exchanger that's under the hood. And that's something that, I'll be honest, when it first got hot, I was like, I just put it in park and I kind of walked away because I had some room to walk around. I was looking at some stuff. And I came back and the coolant temperature was at 190. The transmission temperature was still at 221. And it didn't dawn on me that I needed to do what I just described, of putting it in drive with the parking brake on to let the fluid circulate. And so I did that, and within about 5 minutes it had dropped 13 degrees. And so that was, that's just one of those things that, like, you need to know. You know, if you don't know, you don't know. And I know if I was just a general consumer, let's say I was like towing a boat or something, and I'm not monitoring any temperatures, and that light kicks off, I'm probably going to just pull over and put it in park. And if you do that, it's not going to cool down. So you're just going to end up baking the fluid inside the transmission at that point, and you want it to be circulating. So that's just a kind of general use thing that you guys would probably want to know about. You've got to make sure your transmission's circulating. I know maybe some old school guys will be like, well, duh, but either way, so there definitely needs to be some sort of improvement to bring that down. You know, maybe not necessarily bring it down. I understand the transmission's got to work like it's supposed to, but the fact that I'm at 215 on the coolant and 226 on the transmission, and I had no fans running whatsoever for a pretty long period of time, to the point where I was like, what the heck? You know, I don't know if it's maybe that's operating temperature, and it's designed to be perfectly, you know, it's supposed to run that hot. I don't know. If anybody knows, if you could share it with me, that'd be awesome. Always open to getting more information from people. So feel free to leave a comment, and if you know anything about it or know anybody that might, let me know. Moving on to the next thing. So still transmission related. In the 10-speed, you cannot hold first gear. And that is just, I don't know, just a mind-bending miss to me. So it does not matter what terrain mode you are in. It doesn't matter if you're in sequential mode. It doesn't matter if you're in sport mode with sports sequential turned on, or towing, or any of the modes. It makes no difference. If you have it in first and manual and you start driving between 2,500 and 3,000 RPMs, it will shift to second gear. And that doesn't matter whether you're going uphill, downhill, makes no difference. It will not hold first gear. And I think when climbing, at least, I would like to be able to hold first gear and go between 5 to 8 miles an hour and just leave it in gear and don't fight with it, instead of the transmission shifting to second and then being like, oh, this is too steep, and then shifting back to first. And really obnoxious, actually. I think that's a huge miss. I don't understand. I don't know why if you can't design a transmission to hold first gear, I don't think you designed it well enough. It should be able to hold first gear, and in my opinion, I know I'm probably kind of a small use case here, but I would like to see me be able to take first gear all the way up into, you know, the limiter. And that's only maybe in trail mode, because you might need a ton of wheel spin. That could be a thing. And you can't get there because it just short shifts. And it's just a terrible, overall, I don't know. I think that's just a massive miss. So, you know, that's just going uphill. Going downhill, the reason why this it was so fresh in my head is, so the day before, we were in the Gunnison area, and we had a friend and he actually lost his brakes while we were on the trail, and ended up, you know, kind of putting it into a tree. And we hooked the vehicle up and kind of used it as an anchor, had him put it in 4-low first gear, and thankfully we were only maybe 300 feet from the end of the trail, got it down to the trailhead, and then did the brakes and fixed everything. But the next day we did Paradise Divide, and in the process of doing that trail, ran into a bunch of snow. We were a little early in the season and couldn't get all the way over it, but we had to come back down. And so we're on a shelf road effectively, and there's really no ditch on this side, and there's a straight drop on this side. And I'm like, well, let me just put it in first gear. I'll just lock the transmission in first, and it will not hold first gear. It drifts right through first gear, shifts to second, and you end up, you know, second gear is good for 20 some miles an hour. So 20 some miles an hour going down trail is not ideal. Now first gear at 10, yeah, okay. If my brakes failed, I could survive at 10. We could probably get down without totally wrecking something. So that was just had it kind of fresh in my head that, you know, you really need to be able to rely on the transmission. Now I will say this does have hill descent control. It works relatively well. Kind of the struggle, at least with the Paradise Divide trail, was that it was just steep enough, or just shallow enough of an angle that hill descent control really didn't want to kick in. And first gear, you can't hold first, and second gear is way too fast. So it was kind of this weird spot where nothing worked well, other than obviously you can use your right foot right foot or left foot, whatever you want to do, but use the brakes like a normal human being. You could do that, and that's what I ended up doing on the way down, and it wasn't bad. But so either way, not being able to hold first gear, I think, is a massive miss here, and something that I would love to see change. Now, to the next thing. Found a lot of things when I was trailing it that kind of were not ideal, in my personal opinion. But so I've never owned a vehicle with hill descent control before, and this is my first experience with it. I thought it worked relatively well. It did a good job of holding whatever the set speed was. I was really happy about that. The only downside is a lot of really steep trails have cross ditches for water mitigation, and anytime the Pilot would come back to flat, which I understand, hill descent control would kick out. But it would kick out and it would freewheel until it realized that you were pointed back down the hill again. And so you would go from, like, if you had it set at 3 miles an hour, it would let go, and then it would kick back in at like 6 miles an hour. And so there was that kind of brief moment where you would freewheel, and I think that's one of those things that realistically, if you're relying on the system 100%, that's bad. You should probably be braking and still trying to drive. And then I would also forget that I had turned it on, and so I'd be driving, and then I'd take my foot off the brake, and then it would kick on. And so I think that's a lot of kind of just user error and getting used to it, but it was one of those things that I felt was at least worth noting. Another problem that I had off-road that happened several times was the front collision sensors are still on, and I found myself essentially pushing through a mud hole. It was very soft on top, and I was kind of down in it and was pushing through, and then the sensors fired and stopped me, and I had to hit the home button on the steering wheel to clear it, and then I could continue. And I'm in a mud hole in the middle of nowhere, and it's stopping all my momentum because the front collision sensors are on. And that's one of those things that when you're in trail mode, as far as I'm concerned, you should let me drive into a tree. You should let me rip the whole bumper off. Like, it's trail mode, okay? Like, it's not, you know, I understand it's there. You know, I thank God I haven't accidentally run over one of my kids or anything like that. I've not had to use it for that purpose. However, I understand how people could run over their kids in this day and age. So, like, I'm glad they're there and they're there. But in trail mode, like, just let me drive into a rock. It's fine. You know, it's part for the course. I'm out on the trail. Let me drive into a rock. That should be baked into, you know, I feel like it could be baked into a software update or something like that. Would be awesome to see, instead of being like, oh, sorry guys, now you have to buy the 2024 model. It's like, oh, come on. That doesn't make sense. I feel like that's a really easy thing that can be fixed. Either way, so that's it there.
So after doing a little bit of digging, I was able to find where the low-speed collision sensors were located in the vehicle and turn them off. And so this is something that I do now. Anytime I'm about to take the Pilot off-road, I go in here and turn this off. This will automatically turn back on if you cycle power on the vehicle. So if you stop and start the vehicle again, you're going to have to turn this off again. Just an FYI, I wanted to point this out.
And two other quick things that I think would have been useful is, so it's like, you go out, you buy your new Trailsport, and you want to use it on the trail because it's a trail sport. And then you realize that you need to go buy a scan gauge, so that way you can actually monitor your coolant and transmission temperatures, because none of that data is shared with you. And I think that would be awesome if there was like a trail data page that you could pull up. Even if I like the cameras, I think going to trail mode and having the cameras come up is totally fine. But it would be awesome if I could get into a vehicle specific spot while still driving that would display, you know, your coolant temperature and your engine temperature and your transmission temperature and, you know, the roll and pitch of the vehicle, that sort of thing. I mean, you have the display there, I don't think, and you have the information. The ECU is reading the information all the time anyways. So being able to share that with the end user, I think would be great. That'd be a really, you know, it's nice to not have to go out and buy the $150 scan gauge, which I think works great. But like, I now have a scan gauge mounted to the dash of my Pilot because I can't view that information when I need to. So I bought one and it just lives in the Pilot. So that's one thing I think would be nice to see done differently. And then ultimately, since I do make skid plates and run other designs, the factory skid plates on this are, they do make me a little bit jealous because it's an OEM product. It's you know, 4mm stamped high strength steel. I think that those skid plates that are on here would probably last you the life of the vehicle, which I'm sure was Honda's goal. I think they did a great job. I love all the detail that's put into them. The only thing that I don't like is, I know from running my Ridgeline with our full armor setup underneath, is that it's really easy to clip a rock and have it like tombstone and stand up underneath the vehicle. I've had that happen several times. And the way the factory plate's designed on this, if that happens, it's going to clip and it's going to roll, and then you're going to be past where the factory skid plate stops, so you're going to end up smashing into the exhaust, which is not the end of the world, but smashing into the exhaust. Or in my opinion, what's worse is the PTU, or some people call it a front diff, but the power takeoff for the rear drive shaft, that's just sitting completely exposed underneath the Pilot. And I would love to see more coverage. That's something that obviously we'll be bringing to market as the aftermarket guys, and we're going to start working on that here in the future. But I think it leaves, you're leaving some vitals exposed. I think it does a great job of covering everything up. I think it's made very, very well. However, I would love to see more coverage, and that's kind of the nice part about being in the aftermarket, is that's something that we get to make and bring to market. So either way, though, yeah, that's kind of the thoughts on the Pilot. It's been really good, and overall, I think it's going to be a great platform. I'm looking forward to the other stuff that we get to make for it. It's going to be awesome to see. And yeah, so hope you guys liked the video. Leave comments. Let me know if you guys want me to try anything out specifically with it. I can do that too. And until then, we'll see you guys.